Who wants to be the next Italian wine ambassador? Join an exclusive network of 400 Italian wine ambassadors across 48 countries. Vinitaly International Academy is coming to Chicago on October 19th to 21st, and to Almaty, Kazakhstan from November 16th to 18th. Don't miss out. Register now at vinitaly.com.
Welcome to Masterclass US Market with me, Juliana Colangelo. This show has been designed to demystify the US market for Italian wineries through interviews with experts in sales and distribution, social media, communications, and so much more. We will quiz each of our esteemed guests at the end of each episode to solidify the lessons that we've learned. So sharpen your pencils, get out your notebooks, and join us each week to learn more about the US market.
Welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Jeremy Hart back to the Italian Wine Podcast. For those of you who don't know, Jeremy, in 2021, he co-founded Somm.ai, and he today holds the role of the Chief Strategic Marketing Officer. Jeremy is dedicated to pushing the beverage industry's growth and promotion through data-enhanced methods, and we're really excited to learn more from him on today's episode. Jeremy and I will be doing a three-part series that you'll be hearing over the next several weeks on what's happening in Italian wine in the on-premise market in the United States. We'll be diving into what's trending in terms of varietals, regions, the rising popularity of island wines from Italy, and of course, the ever-present topic of non-alcoholic wine, like it or not. So let's get to it. So first part of this three-part series, the first interview today, we're going to focus in on trends in Italian red wines in the on-premise. But before we dive into today's discussion, Jeremy, just refresh our listeners on what Somm.ai is and the methodology behind the research and the data.
Certainly. So Somm.ai, we've been around for since January 2021. Essentially is what we do. That's as far back as the data goes. We have a little bit going back to 2019 and touching 2020. But over time, essentially is what we do is that we target wine list. And so we do it online. We have some that we do in person, but for the most part, 99% is done online. When we find a wine list, we capture it. We lock in everything that's on that wine list. And then we go across all the wine lists that we have, all the places that we target, all the restaurants every 2 weeks. And then we track all changes going across it. So the big masterpiece to making all this work is a massive database of understanding if it's on a menu and it's Scavino and it's Canubi, that's a Barolo from Piedmont, that's Nebbiolo, right? And so all of those things are locked in when we see those names. And so you're able to chop up information. You can understand trends, whether it's via varietal, region, country, producer, all of those interesting things. And so that's kind of the secret sauce to it all.
Very cool. And when you say, calculating or classifying a Barolo as Nebbiolo, is that being done manually, or how are you, especially in the world of Italian wine where things are labeled so many different ways, how are you classifying on the back end?
So we have a massive database. We basically scurry everything that's on the internet, right? And from that point on, that's where the AI piece comes into play. We're able to sort. We can go in there. We can re-tag if there's something that we see is wrong or pulling differently or whatever it is. But we use probability to understand what it might be. If we sit on a wine list and maybe it's 2 words when it should be 8 words. And we also use headers and things like that so we can understand exactly what we're looking at. All in all, I mean, it's very, very accurate. And then if there's anything that we ever need to go in there and refresh or change, we do. But this long over time, as many eyes as we have on the platform now, it's really drilled in.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thanks for the refresher, Jeremy. It's helpful just to place us in context for today's conversation. So for this episode in part 1, we're going to dive into trends in Italian red wine in the on-premise. And our 3 key takeaways for this episode are: number 1, what Italian red wines are trending in the on-premise. Number 2, where are we seeing some of the largest shifts in consumption in Italian wine in the on-premise? And finally, what are some predictions based on today's data for the future of Italian red wine in the U.S. market? So for starters, let's lead with what everybody probably wants to know. What is the number 1 red varietal in the on-premise in Italian wine?
It's Nebbiolo, which is really, really interesting. And so I'm really glad that this is one of the ones that we're doing. Is going to be Italian red varietals or just Italian varietals in general. To me, this is like one of the magic pieces that data can help answer a lot of questions, right? Because if we look at trends, whether we're looking at Barolo, Barbaresco, Gatinara, whatever it might be, right? We're still going to individually look at those places as individual places and individual wines, which they are and they should be. But in America,
Right.
people drink varietally, right? And so, like, they want to know if it's a cab, they want to know if it's, so on and so forth, whatever, right? I think a lot of the success of Pinot Grigio over the years has been that it's an Italian wine with Pinot Grigio on the label, on the front label, right? And so, this is a really neat way of looking at things. As far as the wines that are on trend are really the most prevalent as far as place, Nebbiolo is number one, Sangiovese is number two, Red Bordeaux blends is number three, which I think, and these are ones that are on the
Okay.
rise right now. So
Right.
Red Bordeaux blends are number three, and then Super Tuscans are number four. Those are all slightly up or significantly up as far as the last year in growth. So Nebbiolo is significantly number one as far as placements. It's also the most on the rise. So it's
Okay.
at 2.8%, right? The total amount of placements of what that would equate to is 2,700 placements in the last year. But overall, to the number of placements that they had, that's a 2.8% growth. Number two is going to be Sangiovese. Number three is going to be the Red Bordeaux blends, up 3.3%. And then number four is going to be the Super Tuscan blends, which is up 403 placements. It's 1.5%. The really interesting thing to me with these is that these are all premium, right? There's nothing in here that is going to be on the low end for the most part.
Yeah, no Montepulciano, right? Or even like, anything more, even something more value driven.
Right. That's actually interesting. The next one behind this, and this is what I was getting to next, was real authentic wines that are true Italian as far as like sense of place and a style to a variety without oak, or at least not a lot of oak. Montepulciano is number five, and then Norello, Mascalese is number six. And that's where the rise of Sicily, right? There's so many things going on right now
Right.
that are making it popular. But
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that in our part two on island wines.
Yep. And so
Yeah.
I think that that's a really interesting kind of thing for premium wines to be on the rise right now. Everyone kind of sees it, and it is a
Right,
real
especially as we talk a lot about the downturn in the economy and people spending less. It's like what we actually see in the data and the numbers, it's quite the opposite, right? And let's talk a little bit about the price points we see in these top wines. I mean, the data shows us that, the average bottle of Nebbiolo is $150 on a wine list. And then, with the Sangiovese, $160 to $125 for the blend. So they're quite a range in this top five varietals and Italian red wines in terms of price points. So, Jeremy, talk to us a little bit through what you're seeing there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think as a flavor profile, these all kind of hit that same thing. They're big, big wines, typically oaked. So they appeal to the American big red drinker, right? But they are still at a premium category. So I think that it is kind of an interesting thing. There is a
Right.
swing between it. I think not Nebbiolo carries a certain amount of weight because of Barolo and those things. But now because of that, people still lean towards Nebbiolo as being like if they can get it, $28 a glass, they're pretty happy. Regardless of whether it's Langhe Nebbiolo or where it's from. And so it's kind of an interesting thing that all of these are still viewed as premium on the palate.
Is there any regional trends? Like when we're talking about Nebbiolo and the popularity. I mean, with that growth and that percent, 2.8% growth over last year, like any particular markets that you think really contributed to that growth, especially as we think about palettes and stylistic patterns around these varietals?
Yeah, I think that kind of across the board, I remember seeing Langhe Nebbiolo in I don't even remember when it was, maybe 2016, something like that. Is something you'd start to see around. I think that it's now gone on long enough to where people have become more accustomed to it because it's not an oddity anymore. It's like any standard producer now makes one. It was like the Normale Barolo, right? As far as like, oh yeah, everyone does that. Even they have the cruise, all of that. Now everyone does that declassified or whatever you want to call it. One of the biggest shockers out of all of this is looking at Nebbiolo as far as data is that the biggest two producers by placement are both from Barbaresco. And that's out of all producers for Nebbiolo, right?
And which are those producers?
Gaia is number one, and their average bottle price on a wine list is $600 at number one, right?
Wow.
That's wild.
But it's their Barbaresco that has more placements than their Barolo.
Right, but just Nebbiolo as a whole. This is the cool thing about looking
Right.
at data, looking at varietally in Italy. The number
Yeah.
two producer is Prodottatori. And so they have about 3,400 placements, and their average price point on a wine list for their Nebbiolo is 141.
Interesting. Very interesting. Why do you think that is? Do you think the price point of a Barbaresco is just more palatable? Mind the pun. But what do you think is contributing to Barbaresco's popularity over Barolo when it comes to the Nebbiolo segment?
You would just never think of it. I think Prodottatori is one of those producers that just does a tremendous job, and they have a line of wines that are pretty affordable considering what they are, even though they're pretty
Mm-hmm.
pricey, right? And then
Right.
Gaia just transcends everything. And I'm not here to, just salute Gaia, but like if there's a DRC in Italy, it's Gaia. It's not even close.
So brand recognition when it comes to Gaia, and then with the Prototori, perhaps it's price point or accessibility by price point.
Yep. And so check this out. The number three producer for all of Nebbiolo, right, is a single producer is Vietti, right, which is tremendous,
Mhm.
wonderful wines, but they're at 160 and they have 3,100 placements, right? The number four is Scavino at 180 with 2,400 placements. So you look back at Gaia and they have 5,400 placements and their average price point is $600.
Wow.
It's so far ahead of everything. It's wild. The average price of Barolo, just FYI, is 175 on a wine list in America.
Okay, compared to our average on Nebbiolo is 150. So, or $25 more on the Barolo versus the overall Nebbiolo category. I mean, what I take away from this data and what you're telling us, Jeremy, I mean, a couple of things. I think, we're seeing people gravitate towards varietal and Nebbiolo really becoming more of a staple, probably especially in steakhouses and Italian restaurants, of course. And then we're seeing the power of brands with Gaia, right? And in terms of what they've been able to do in the market and their investment in building their brand here. I think that's what I'm really, taking away from some of the things that you're saying to us right now.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think once you hit kind of a certain tier, and this is kind of, I think a lot of people would agree with us or say it, it's not like it's not uncommon knowledge, but once you really hit that tier and you become the premium producer, it's like you're cashing your own checks. And the marketing takes care of itself. It's just like this self-fulfilling prophecy, because so
Yeah.
you can afford it at that point to judge it or put it in the same realm as something else. It always gets that third or fourth consideration with every taste. And
Right.
wines are built to last 30 years. It's hard to judge them immediately and say this is wrong or right or whatever. So, anyways, Nebbiolo is a nice category to be in if you can be in it in Italy, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. And then let's talk a little bit about some of the other categories in this list. We look at Sangiovese next. So what do you think's happening there with Sangiovese coming in at number 2 with 1.4% growth?
I think that we're leaning back towards purist. This goes back to people like to drink varietally, right? In the US. I know that stylistically, if it still says County Classico or whatever it might say on the front of the label, people lean towards that. And the really interesting thing is that a lot of the IGTs, the past, 6-7 years, have leaned back towards doing 100% Sangiovese, but calling them IGTs. People, they look at it and they're like, oh, that's great. That's a super Tuscan. Through data, we know that that's 100% Sangiovese, right? And that's what we're
Right.
tagging it as and categorizing as. And so it's nice to kind of be able to see through some of that stuff. But I think that the IGT, because you really look at this, the Sangiovese blend, the Super Tuscan blend, the Red Bordeaux blend, all of those, can fall within those categories of what they're placed under, even 100% Sangiovese. And so I just think it's that big red, right?
The Sangiovese is capturing all those various styles, Super Tuscan, etc.
Yeah.
Chianti, of course. Yeah, I mean, I think, we see in the news, oh, people are drinking less, they want to drink lighter. But then you see the data, it's like, actually, they're drinking big red wines.
Right.
So it's, I think, really important to, yes, pay attention to trends and what people are talking about in the news, but never forget to also pay attention to what's actually happening in the market, by looking at data sets from tools like Somm.ai to see what people are actually drinking and purchasing, what's actually making it, onto the wine list. So I think that's super important. So, obviously, Jeremy, we're talking here Nebbiolo, Sangiovese, Barolo, Chianti, like very well established categories, varietals. Obviously, not always. It took many years and decades to establish these regions, these categories, these wines in the US market, and a lot of investment from some really leading producers and brands, right? But what would you say, if you had a crystal ball, might be the next big red? Like if we're talking in 5 years, is something surpassing Nebbiolo number one in your data set?
I would probably say it's going to be some form of a Corvina blend, that's going to lean more towards the IGT style. People like Valpolicella wines. They do. It's one of those areas that is, when you look at purchasing, obviously it's very well represented in the red style, right? But as far as the average drinker, they really lean towards it. And I think that there's a lot of brand recognition there. And so I think that that's going to be the next big thing. Is going to be those ones that have a little bit of Merlot or whatever it might be in it, just to get that super Tuscan label and a Veneto wine,
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a surprising answer, actually. I wasn't expecting that, but I think the more I think about it, you're right. I mean, that Veneto, the category, it is set up with established, very historic, family-owned brands that have long histories in the U.S. market, palate-wise, with the blends of international varietals like Merlot into the wines. They are palatable to the U.S. market, and those wines are comparatively priced pretty well, depending, you can find some pretty decent values when you look at those Valpolicella blends. So interesting. Okay. Anything else you want to comment on, Jeremy, just on this first part of our series on Italian red wines and the on-premise?
I'm curious to see how everything will play out. There's always some little indicators of this might happen or this might happen. With Italy, it's so dug in on the mainstays. One of the things that's kind of surprised me is that you don't see Aglianico as well represented as I used to think it was.
Yeah.
But it might have just been my opinion, and we don't have data from them. You know what I mean? So it's really kind of hard to think back.
What do you mean you don't have data from them? It's
like,
not even
10 years ago. You know what I mean? There just was no one really kind of collecting data.
Got it. I see. Okay.
But it was always one of those things that was always like kind of mentioned the top four. You know what I mean? If you're talking about big juicy reds or whatever it might be. So it's going to be interesting kind of see what plays out. But what Americans tend to lean towards are going to be the more kind of, well-structured big reds. And
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the sweet spot for a long time.
Great. Well, Jeremy, we'll do our rapid fire quiz. We'll only do this for part one, so we don't need to make you repeat the same answers 3 different times. But first question, what is your number one tip for mastering the U.S. wine market?
My number one tip is to keep it simple. If you're given the opportunity to, write a pitch or whatever it might be, or if you're in front of a buyer or whatever it might be, whoever you're pitching to buy your product, close with interesting things that are easily repeatable. Because whatever you say, they're going to try to shrink it down into even fewer words. And by the time it gets to the consumer, you want to, big juicy red, whatever it might be, most placed in the region, or oldest producer, or whatever that interesting thing is that locks it up. Just keep it simple.
Simplify. Yep. I like that. Great advice. Number 2, what is something you might have told your younger professional self about working in the wine industry in the U.S.?
I really, 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 really wish I would have collected people's emails.
You started a long time ago in the industry. Nowadays, there's no excuse.
Yeah, and it's so funny because, over time, I remember, one place I worked when I initially got into wine, they had an email list, and this was back in the mid 2000s. It was 2,000 people, serious consumers. And at that time, I looked at it, and I was just all yeah, that's kind of interesting, whatever. If I just would have grabbed a couple here and there over the years of the end consumers, I would have had, 15,000 contacts now for that. It would have been great.
Wow. Yeah. So collect those emails. There's digital business cards now too. Those come in handy for sure. And finally, number 3, we all travel lots in this industry. What is one of your favorite travel hacks when you're traveling for work?
Start with a bottle of Prosecco in a meeting.
Love that.
It sounds, comical, whatever, but it really lowers people. It makes them very comfortable.
This is not a travel hack I've heard before. Start with Prosecco, but one I can definitely get on board with.
Yeah, it's funny. It just loosens everyone up, and they're ready to go. Italy's best sparkling wine, whatever it might be. It's great. So yeah, Franciacorta is where it's at. Cool.
Franciacorta, Prosecco, bottle bubbles. Love it. All right. Well, thank you, Jeremy. And for those of our followers and listeners that are not already connected with you, how can people follow along with all the work you're doing at Somm.ai?
Yeah, so reach out to me. I mean, that's kind of the best way of going about it. I'm on LinkedIn. I do quite a few interesting, benchmarking kind of things or perspective of some CNN data. That's probably the best way to do it. LinkedIn.
And Jeremy Hart on LinkedIn, correct?
Yep.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you for joining me today. Stay tuned each week for new episodes of Masterclass US Wine Market with me, Juliana Colangelo. And remember, if you enjoyed today's show, hit the like and follow buttons wherever you get your podcasts.